Okay, welcome. It's really an honor to be here. My name's Kim Monson, and I'm the host of the Kim Monson Radio Show, which broadcasts on KLZ 560 AM, 6 to 8 a.m., Monday through Friday. The first hour is rebroadcast 1 to 2 in the afternoon. The second hour, 10 to 11 at night. My other show, which broadcasts on Sunday afternoons, is America's Veteran Stories. And I had the great honor in 2016 to accompany 4 D-Day veterans to Normandy, France for the 72nd anniversary of the D-Day landings. I returned stateside realizing that we need to know these stories. We need to record them and archive them and broadcast them. So hence America's Veteran Stories. And over the years, I've interviewed many of our veterans from many of our different wars and conflicts. But now that they're in their 90s and early hundreds, I've interviewed over 250 World War II veterans. And it's really changed my life. And I realize that this great American idea that so many from the very beginning of our country is under attack. And this idea of America was unique throughout human history. The idea that individuals could own property, that they could pursue their happiness and life and liberty. It was unique throughout history. And I don't think our founders really understood what could happen if everyday people could own property and go after their hopes and dreams. Well, America happened. And we are currently living at the pinnacle of human flourishing. And it is under attack. And I thank Josh, Lisa, Sunny, Liz, the whole team here for their great work in understanding that we are at a very dangerous time in our country. And I think Josh alluded to it. I don't think people quite understand what is right underneath the surface regarding control of our lives. And with me, this all started, so I grew up in western Kansas. My family's farmers for many generations. And I love the land. I love the people. I love the people that feed and fuel us. And I understand that this is really under attack. And it all, I would say, started with me back in, it was light bulbs. I don't know if you remember, but Republicans and Democrats came together to start to regulate our light bulbs. And that was where I started to understand that something wasn't right. I liked to have the choice of my light bulbs. And remember the curly Q light bulbs that were supposed to be good for us, but yet to throw them away, you weren't supposed to put them in a landfill. And I'm thinking something isn't matching up here. And so for me, that's where I realized that we were starting to have our lives regulated significantly. And the kids would come home from school. I have 3 kids and 5 little grandchildren. And I feel this responsibility that we need to pass on something great to the next generation. And I'm so concerned about what is happening. And so I have a semester of college, University of Kansas. It was important to me that my children go to college. Worked hard to pay for that. And my youngest was studying political science at CSU. So I have 2 CSU students and 1 KU student. And we were going to a wedding in Canada. And the kids over the years had come home from school saying things that they were antithetical to my beliefs, what I cared about. And so we were going to a wedding in Canada. My oldest child wasn't with us. And Tom was driving, I was here, my youngest was here, and then my daughter was here. Again, studying political science. And he started to espouse the benefits of a one-world government with 9 judges that would make all the decisions about our lives. And I blew a gasket. I think he thought I was mad at him. But I was mad at what was happening. And people say now on the show that I'm very calm, cool, collected most of the time, and I try to be. But I said, you didn't know, I really had to go through an angry period. I had to get to a point where I understood what is going on. And I think more and more people are waking up. And again, Josh has spent so much time to bring this Our American Lands to fruition here. And the hour, as they said in the video, is very, very late. But I'm very encouraged because God had his hand on this country at the very beginning. I do feel that we are at a 1775 moment in our country now, and we'll determine if we'll move forward with freedom and liberty or not. But there are so many people that are waking up and that are understanding what is happening. So foundational to this whole idea of America is property rights. Property rights of what you think, being able to speak, and to own property. And what I've learned over the years is you may think you own your property, but then when you understand ordinances and rules and regulations, that you don't. And of course, particularly in the metro area where I live, not sure how property values have gone up here, but people have faced significant property tax increases. And with that, they are facing 30 to 40% to 50% increases in their property taxes. And a friend of mine said that if you think you own your land, just don't pay your taxes and you'll find out. And so what I'm concerned about is that people are being taxed out of their homes. And a number of years ago on the show, we did a show about the World Economic Forum and their agenda. It was with one of my sponsors who is a real estate, a realtor in the metro area, and we both kind of looked at each other like, are we putting on tin hats to really talk about this? Because we saw this quote that by 2030, that we'll own nothing and we'll be happy about it. Well, I don't think we'll be happy about it, but they sure seem to be drilling down on trying to make sure that we don't own anything. And if you're up in the metro area, what we've seen is there's this push of 4, 5, 6-story apartment buildings that people don't own anything. And they're all over the metro area, and they're up and down what they call the transportation corridor. And the idea is that people would live in these small apartments, that they would not drive their cars, and that they would ride buses and trains and bicycles and walk around, and that is how life would be, that they'd be able to work in that particular area, and that's how life will be. And I wondered, how is it that we have all of these apartment buildings that are being built in the metro area? And what has happened is there's very favorable financing from the federal government, and then coming out of the state capitol, and then also at the county commissioner level and the municipal level, is we are seeing ordinances and rules, regulations that is really making it more and more difficult to own your own home, to own your property. So we are in a time right now that we must stand for our property rights, and that's why this is so prescient that we will be having this conference. So the premise of the conference is to reveal truths about what many have written off as conspiracy theories and misinformation. We will be informing and listening to you in a real question and answer format with our lineup of speakers, video clips, informational handouts, and visual aids. We hope to arm you with data, facts, and homework to help you make more informed decisions about our American lands, public and private. And all the video clips that are seen today, you can see them in full in the video section of OurAmericanLands.com website. I want to make sure that I mentioned all the things that I had written down. Let's talk a little bit about climate change, because they alluded to the different names. It was global warming until we figured out what they were talking about. Now it's climate change. And I've had the great honor to be in a documentary, Climate Conversation. You can watch it at climateconversation.com. I think Josh has a clip from that. But a friend of mine, who's a geophysicist, he's been in the business for 50 years. He and his wife decided to take money out of their retirement account because he wanted to make a movie about the climate and this conversation around it. Because as a geophysicist, he was realizing that many of the things that are being said out there, that narrative that our kids are being taught, is just not true. His wife is also running for State House. She was a Lakewood City Councilwoman, and 20 years ago she was a House District Representative, House District 30, and she is running again after all these years because she feels it's so important. So they took money out of their retirement account and created this documentary, and they asked me to be the moderator on it. And that's how I think I ended up here, is because Josh had seen that and thought that he'd like to have me moderate this particular forum. What has happened from a climate conversation? It has been broadcast on Newsmax many times, and we have started a podcast series as well. Yesterday, we just recorded our 16th podcast, and this is with scientists and experts regarding this whole narrative on a climate conversation. We've not published it yet, probably will be within the next week or so, but a recent podcast was with Nobel laureate John Clauser from 2022. He received the Nobel Prize for Physics. He is at the end of his career, so he's not beholden to having anybody tell him what to say. And so he is very honest about the whole conversation regarding a climate conversation. So I think at this time, I think we'd like to run the video for a climate conversation, please.
We'll just keep them. Okay, and action.
Hello, I'm Kim Monson of The Kim Monson Show, where we search for truth and clarity by looking at these issues through the lens of freedom versus force, force versus freedom. In my political conversations, few can be as confusing and polarizing as the issue of climate change. Ask the average person what it is and how they feel about it, and you're bound to get a wide variety of answers. And this is supposed to be a topic that we all agree on, according to what we've been told by the powers that be. You've probably heard this statistic that 97% of scientists agree on climate change, specifically when it comes to human involvement in its creation. Well, then who wants to be on the wrong side of that equation, especially when it comes to a supposed unbiased scientific consensus? And why has it become political? Shouldn't we all be able to examine the scientific evidence and all draw the same conclusions, regardless of what candidate you support in an election? I would say that the majority of us agree that we don't want a waste-filled planet that has become inhospitable to life as a result of our activity as human beings. We all desire clean air, fresh water, and fertile land that continues to flourish throughout the generations of our human existence. So as the planet changes, as we're able to record its fluctuations in climate, temperature, CO2 content, and so forth, what does it mean? Are the consequences of our actions bringing a coming planetary apocalypse? And if this is the case, what measures, however extreme, have to be taken to prevent this inevitable extinction? These are the questions I have, and I want answers if there are answers to be had. I want answers that are science-based and not subject to political interests. So that's what we intend to do. Today we're going to have an honest, simple, and short discussion on this broad topic we call climate change. Our discussions today will take us through a wide range of topics, including the history of Earth's temperature and CO2 content, a discussion for the cost for the United States to go carbon-free by 2050, the availability of materials to go carbon-free, and the implications of gaining access to those materials. Today, we're seeking the honest, unfiltered truth when it comes to the climate of our planet.
Yeah, let me just I'll have to call you back. I'm in a documentary.
I'd like to introduce Gregory Wrightstone. Gregory Wrightstone is a geologist with more than 35 years of experience researching and studying various aspects of the Earth's processes. He was recently accepted as an expert reviewer for the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. If anyone is poised to tackle our most pressing questions, he's definitely on the list.
I started getting into climate change several years ago, and as I started researching it, because I got into it because I knew that some of what we were being told was just incorrect. The science, the facts, and the data just were opposite of what we're being told.
You can slate it. Marker.
Give me some break. I talk to rocks. I don't talk to people.
I'd also like to introduce Walt Johnson. Walt is a career geophysicist and independent geological consultant who can also lend a concrete scientific perspective to our conversation today.
My specialty is sending sound waves into the ground. When I joke that I talk to the earth, I really do. And I'm probably one of the few people that can actually say that. I work for no publicly traded companies. I have no dog in the fight here, shall we say. As Paul Harvey would say, you're going to get the rest of the story today.
So let's start from the basics. When I think of climate change, global warming is what comes to mind first. It's so prevalent that most people use the terms global warming and climate change interchangeably. So let's address this first. Is the planet warming? And should this be the primary reason for us to be concerned about our future?
The words they use again are unusual and unprecedented. Is our temperatures today? They're saying, well, our temperatures are hotter than they've been forever or on record. Well, if your record only goes back 150 years, that would be correct. Because we are in a warming trend, but that warming trend started more than 300 years ago. It was in the depths of what was called the Little Ice Age, probably the coldest period of the last 10,000 years.
Whoa, hold on a second. Is he saying that the Earth has actually been warmer in the past than it was today? As a healthy skeptic, when someone puts a graph like this in front of me, my first thought is, where in the world are you getting this data? How are you able to tell me that you know exactly what the temperature was thousands of years ago?
When we look through geologic time over the last 10,000 years, we've got some pretty good records using what are called proxy data.
Okay, let's stop again. Proxy data. If we're really going to go down this rabbit hole of climate change, let's not make any assumptions about what we're being told. So what in the world is proxy data? After some research, it turns out proxy data is a widely accepted scientific method of using preserved physical characteristics of the environment that can stand in for direct measurements. In fact, you've probably run into this before. When someone references the rings of a tree trunk to predict its age, they are using the proxy data of the tree's rings to do so. As human beings, we've only been directly recording temperature for a small amount of time. So it makes sense that to reach further back into the past, we rely on proxy data to do so.
That data goes back 800,000, nearly 1 million years. It's ice core data from Antarctica. And they can actually sample bubbles that were captured within the ice. For longer term data, millions of years, it's sea sediment data and rock data where they can take, they use what's called proxies to estimate that.
Okay, that's starting to make sense, and sorry for the interruption. Let's get back to our warming temperatures.
We have been here for a long time, and throughout history, we have adapted. And we did better when it was warmer. When you look at detail, on the cyclical nature of things, we're in an optimum. I went on a trip to Egypt once, and the lady that ran it had Egyptologists working for her. And something came up about climate, and I said, what was the climate like in Egypt? And she said, it must have been really bad, really cold. That was her feeling. She's been impressed that way from the public. Well, we know from agriculture records and everything else, Egypt was warmer than it was today.
Before climate science became politicized, these were called climate optima, and they were called climate optima for a very good reason. Humanity flourished and prospered, and food was abundant. During the last period, it was called the medieval warm period that went from about the year 850 to 1250. It was called the High Middle Ages. At the time of Magna Carta, great cathedrals were built. People thrived and prospered, and it started going bad when it started getting cold. The previous warming period before that was called the Roman warm period. It was the time of Christ. It correlated to the Iron Age. Again, the time of great civilizations and empires that rose up. We know it was much warmer because the Romans were growing citrus in the north of England near Hadrian's Wall. Well, you can't do that today. The first great civilizations grew up during a time called the Minoan warm period. It was known as the Bronze Age. And again, life was good. All these great civilizations prospered and thrived. The Hittites, the Assyrians, the Babylonians. And we know it was much warmer because they were growing a crop called millet in Scandinavia. Well, that crop can only be grown in subtropical areas today. So we know it had to have been a lot warmer. And again, it's completely opposite of what we're being told. We're being told if we go to those temperatures like they experienced during the Minoan, the Roman, and the medieval warm period, it will be horrific. History doesn't tell us that. We need to go back and take a look at what happened in human history to find that these previous warm periods were hugely beneficial. We should celebrate the warming, celebrate the increasing carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. Again, by almost every metric we look at, we see benefits to Earth's ecosystems and to the human condition.
How can that be? The Earth is thriving? That seems pretty far-fetched. And something Greg said leads me to my next question, which is carbon dioxide or CO2. This is the big one. It makes sense. If we as humans are outputting more CO2 in the atmosphere, and the CO2 is causing the warming of our planet, doesn't it make sense that this man-made change will stress our planet beyond what it can naturally handle? So where does CO2 fit into this whole picture of climate change?
One of the biggest things we're being told is that CO2, carbon dioxide, is at extraordinarily high on levels. It's unusual and unprecedented. And it is true if you only look over the last 150, 200 years, that's true. Looking at it as I do as a geologist, I look into geologic time, and I find that our levels of carbon dioxide, which they're calling the demon molecule, I call it the miracle molecule, we look at the 420 parts per million we are today. It's 1/6 of what the average carbon dioxide levels are throughout Earth's history.
The temperature of the Earth for the past 4.5 billion years. That's a long time. And if you look on the lower right-hand side, one of those plots is carbon dioxide. That's the purple one. The blue one is the temperature. And notice the carbon dioxide, you see the little blip up on it. That's what we're so worried about right now, that the world is going to fall apart.
Okay, I'm learning the ppm, or parts per million measurement of CO2 is important to understand where we currently are in CO2 levels on Earth. We currently sit a little over 400 ppm, and it's currently being touted by many mainstream sources as a dangerous level. And it makes sense, according to the charts they use. We are at an alarming level of CO2 concentration when compared to the last 800,000 years or so. But compared to the total history of the Earth, it doesn't look near as ominous. So, that leaves us with the question, what is a dangerous level of CO2?
So OSHA sets levels of dangers, I believe, starting at 8,000 parts per million for human health. And our research at the CO2 Coalition and our agronomists tell us that we'll see major benefits of CO2 for plant growth. It'll probably peak around 1,200 parts per million, or 3 times what it is today. And it'll continue increasing and benefiting plant growth, continuing, but not as much. But the main benefits will be from 400, where we are now, to about 1,200 parts per million. What we see is actually the carbon dioxide levels in our atmosphere, rather than being at levels that are much too high, were at actually historically low levels. In fact, they were dangerously low levels, and not that too long ago in geologic history. At the end of the last ice age, we know the carbon dioxide levels plummeted to near what I call the line of death. They got to 182 parts per million, and the line of death is at 150 parts per million. And why is that dangerous? Because below 150 parts per million, plant life cannot survive. We nearly got there. That would be a true climate catastrophe. The fact of the matter is, we need more CO2, not less. As we increase CO2, plants need less water to survive. And that's because they don't need to, if you will, breathe in and breathe out. It's called transpiration. And during that process, plants lose the water and require more water out of the soil. With more CO2, they don't have to do that. They're not losing as much water. And because of increasing carbon dioxide levels on the Earth's atmosphere, we're seeing just crop growth breaking records year after year. And by almost every metric we look at, ecosystems are thriving from the near polar regions to the equator. Vegetation is increasing and exploding. According to NASA satellite data, more than 50% of the Earth has an increase. They call it greening. It's an increase in vegetation. Less than 4% of the Earth's surface is what they call browning, or loss of vegetation. That's a pretty good trade-off. I'd take that any day of the week.